Simon, you're obviously been a driven person in all your time in business. Once you started to get your early wins, because bear in mind that you were ultimately the co-founder of this organization with a stock market listing of nearly or more than $500 million. So a guy who starts out realizing he's just got a bit of a creative talent and can write an ad better than the next person, how does he go from here to here? What's the thinking? What's the activity involved with doing that? As a person who coaches and mentors the best entrepreneurs in their space, who operate in fields associated with wealth, business, relationships, and health, and I tell you, there's something very special about working with the best of the best. People who are at the top of their game, looking to become even more successful, not by working harder, but by optimizing things like the way they think and what they do. Now, as a mentor to some of the most successful entrepreneurs over the world, my guest today is one of the best. Imagine being the author of 5 best-selling books on entrepreneurship with a track record of being the co-founder of a company that's achieved a $500 million stock market valuation in just 8 years. Not only that, he's been featured on the front cover of this country's leading newspapers and has also been the subject of 2 60 Minutes stories. And if you're that person, you obviously know something about entrepreneurship. And so with that, can I welcome you today, Siimon Reynolds? Thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, it's an honor to be here.
Excellent. Well, tell me, Siimon, before we start, do you think that entrepreneurs can achieve more by doing or thinking?
Big question. Big question to start. Clearly a combination, but there is no doubt that people who aren't making as much money as they could be are not doing enough thinking. I think it was the founder of IBM, Thomas Watson, said that thinking's the hardest thing you can do. That's why people very rarely do it. And you bring up a fantastic point, because if you look at a lot of the richest people in the world, and I've studied them in depth as you have, and many of them became rich not by hard work, but because of ideas, a thought that they had. So Michael Dell founded Dell Computer, one of the richest people in the world. Everybody in Silicon Valley works hard, but he came up with an idea 30 years ago of selling computers direct. In the old days, they used to sell them in showrooms, like cars, and that made him a billionaire. Or you take Richard Branson. Does he work hard? Well, he lives on an island and is still making billions of a year. It's an idea. First of all, the idea was a record store that became Virgin Records. Then there was an airline, etc. A series of ideas. Or you talk about great female self-made billionaires, Sarah Blakely from Spanx. And, I know you're wearing Spanx and I, underneath here, but females wearing Spanx will well know that it's everywhere. Mm-hmm. Well, that only started because of an idea where she got a pair of scissors and she cut stockings and made them shorter. And really, that made her a billionaire. Yes, she had to work hard. Yes, she had to persist and all this kind of stuff. But your point's really valid. We're addicted to work, and that's good because people, most people want to work hard, but we're not thinking enough.
One of the, of course, distractions is the overthinking of things too. I know a lot of intelligent people suffer with the attribute of overthinking. How do you find that balance between doing and thinking?
Yeah, look, it's fascinating, isn't it? Generally speaking, in the business world, overthinking is equated with poor results. And the reason is a concept called the corridor principle. And the corridor principle is if you go into one of those large hotels and you're on floor 20 and you get out of the lift or elevator and you can just see 20 doors. we have no idea whether there's gold in those doors or a bear trap in those doors or whatever. The only way of knowing is to open doors.
Sure.
And most people are running their business as the opposite of the corridor principle. They will literally try one or two things and open no more doors for the rest of their career. And I see businesses go under, and there's people listening and watching this right now who are on the verge of going under.
Yeah.
And there's 25 things that you know as a master marketing and sales and generator, and I know that they haven't even looked at. And if they did 2 or 3 more of them, not only could they save the business, they could 10x the business because they're just overthinking their scenario rather than just getting on with it.
I think what happens with a lot of people trying to grow their business to that point, they try 2 or 3 things. And just because those 2 or 3 things don't work, they immediately default back to the thought that, oh, well, my idea is shit.
Yeah.
You know, and as a consequence, they miss out on a lot of things. As opposed to, there is also that entrepreneur who looks at somebody and tries to model himself on the best person in their space. Might be real estate, it might be, I don't know, selling property, whatever it might be. And they'll look at the top performer and they'll think to themselves, if I do what the top performer is doing but do more of it, I am going to become the top performer. Yet what I often see as the consequence of that approach is burnout, where people just go, I just can't do it anymore. You know, I was speaking to a real estate agent the other day who desperately wanted to grow his listing presentations. And I said, so what's going to be the grow the number he does per month? What's going to be the catalyst? What has to change, do you think, for you to make more money? And he said, just to get more listings. And I said, so how do you get more listings? He said, I need to knock on more doors. And I said, so what's your conversion ratio for if you knocked on, let's say, and you did 10 listing presentations, how many of those are you going to get? And he said, I'll get 5. And I said, so what do you do with the other 5?
Great question.
And he's gone, I go and find another 5 to try and replace the ones I missed out on. And I said, but hang on a minute. These people have invited you into their home to talk about the potential sale of their property. And they've ended with oh, look, leave it with us and we'll come back to you, and potentially chosen another agent. How much time did you invest in doing a post-mortem subsequent to you doing that listing presentation and go, what could I have improved about my interaction with this person? Because at the end of the day, the reason why that person didn't give you the listing is because they didn't think that you're the person capable of going out to finding that buyer who's going to fall in love with the place and pay the most amount of money. And so that type of thinking really makes a difference. People don't focus on the things that don't go right. They focus a lot on the things that, you know, do well. Do you find that in your coaching of, and I know you've coached some billionaires in terms of, you know, trying to be more successful and optimizing what they're doing. Do you find that people fail to sort of be reflective enough on their activity that they're doing and are constantly in the chase of, let me just go and find more?
Oh, 100%. 100%. As the philosopher Thoreau said, the unexamined life is not worth living. But most people do not examine their life. You know, we have this period of about 1 minute when we turn the lights out, going to sleep. And for most people, they spend about a minute thinking about their life before they go to sleep. Not so the most successful people. And it's a great technique that you suggested. If you look at elite performing organizations, and I spend a lot of time studying, for instance, elite military units, and let's take one as an example. There's a famous acrobatic Air Force group called the Blue Angels.
Yeah.
And you've probably seen them. We have an Australian version of them. They do incredibly intricate, dangerous moves at, you know, festivals or New Year's Day or whatever. Well, That group has been going for over 40 years. And obviously, it is the most elite of the elite American pilots. But at the end of every performance, and remember, every performance is the same. It's not as if they haven't done it before.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of every performance, they have a ritual where they go into a room, they all take their hats off, which is to symbolize that no one has a rank above others. And then they critique every inch of it. And that's how you be the best. And by just doing that, it's such a macro affecting technique, what you've suggested. Just by doing that, you can completely change your business and indeed your life.
In terms of getting more sales, do you subscribe to the theory that the better you are as a communicator, in other words, the better you are at being able to understand what's going on for the person you're pitching to or presenting to or selling to, the better that you are at understanding what's going on in their life, the more apt and the more equipped that you are in being able to successfully present your offer in a way that's going to fulfill their needs?
Oh, undoubtedly. And this, look, as you know, as you know, a guy who really understands sales at a high level, there's numerous levels of sales ability. The first is you just say the right things. So this product does this for you. But that's very shallow because in this world, there's another 5 companies that will also be able to promise that same thing. So in a hyper-competitive world, it doesn't work enough just to be able to say, these are the reasons why. Although most people have not even achieved that. Above that is, I trust this person. And what is the structure of trust? Has anyone ever asked that?
It's a great question, isn't it?
Yeah. And a lot of it is, this person understands me.
Yeah.
They understand their field. And most importantly, they understand the problem that I am trying to solve much, much more intimately than these other people who are just on broadcast. I'm just going to talk to you about what I offer versus receive. And we end up in a place of great subtlety where the nuances of the empathy between the two people is what sells. Now, I came from the advertising field, and there's almost nothing that doesn't cost $1 million in mainstream corporate advertising. So you might typically be pitching for an account where they're spending $5 million a year. And so it's a big decision for that company. Maybe it's $30 million a year. Telstra over $100 million a year. Big decision for that company. And I've seen again and again and again, at the end of the presentation, when they've looked at 3 different agencies, many times they just go with someone that makes them feel good, even with millions of dollars at stake. And that's the subtle area of sales that most people haven't explored, and you have.
And so if we look at the top performers, there's a lot of people wanting to do better, entrepreneurs, people in business wanting to do better, watching or listening. And they're thinking, well, I will just search out the activity of someone who's at the top of the game and just try and replicate what they're doing, use their words, use their actions. They made a video like this, so I'll make one, or they've made a reel, or they do this, or they say this in a listing, or whatever they do in their sales presentation, and try to duplicate and don't encounter the results that they feel their efforts should reward them with. Do you think they miss the understanding that there is a whole lot of non-verbal stuff going on that this high performer knows about? And it's not often spoken about, is it?
Oh, absolutely. And then there's a charisma factor that some people in the room, they just exude certainty, and they just give off a field where people just want to do business with them. But it's interesting. So often, first of all, copying the best people will improve your situation, no doubt about it, to some extent. But in many, many cases, what they're doing now wasn't what made them successful.
Correct.
You want to say, okay, when they were young, when they were starting out, when they had a 3-year-old business, not a 20-year-old business, what were they doing? I'll give you a classic example. I'm old enough to remember when a KFC first came to Australia. And for anyone older, they will recall that it wasn't called KFC. It was Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I remember, because it was such so enticing at the time, what their marketing campaign was globally. And the marketing campaign, the thing that actually built KFC, that made it a global success, wasn't anything that they're doing now. They have completely forgotten what made this company successful. And what was it? It was, we have had 11 secret herbs and spices in Kentucky Fried Chicken. That's what makes the taste. And people said, what is that? 11?
What does 11 secret herbs and spices do?
Spot on. And that's what made them successful. So we've got to go back to your point. We've got to go back to looking at what they were doing originally and emulate that.
I think, though, in order to do that and understand the non-verbal attribute, you talk about trust. Apart from, doing what I say or promise I'm going to do, there's a lot more non-verbal things that come into this scenario of trust. As you say, confidence. Like if I'm doing a pitch that's sort of a bit, meek and mild, I mean, who wants to trust that person? Imagine getting lost in the bush or somewhere and a guy goes, oh, look, I think I know the way out. Just follow me, and all these people are starving. Confidence is really important when it comes to trust. Eye contact is really important when it comes to trust. I am amazed with the people I speak to, how they cannot maintain eye contact at that most important point where they're going,
yes,
I promise you what I can deliver will get you the result that you want. Eye contact, body language, the way in which they articulate, the tonality of their voice, all of these things are often overlooked by someone who's just trying to replicate the processes and the things that a high performer does. And I think, in my opinion, few people take time to become self-aware and to ask themselves questions like, well, why do I respond like that to this situation? Or why does that trigger this? Why does that situation trigger me? Because my point being this, that if you aren't self-aware and understand how your emotions interfere with the decisions that you make and your responses to things, how can you possibly be able to anticipate how someone else is going to respond to a certain situation? And so you might be great on the rote learning version of your sales pitch, but how often does an appointment go straight? Do you think that fundamentally people are frightened to look within?
Well, as one person said, your head is a scary place to be, and I think for a lot of people it is. I think there's very little introspection, and if you look at confidence, there's in the sales arena, there's confidence in what you're selling. The audience, anyone listening or watching this could ask, how confident am I in what I'm selling? And how can I design things so that I am supremely confident in what I'm selling? And because then you reach a point where, as you say, people are impacted by it and they're persuaded by it. But then there's the confidence in yourself. How do I generate deep confidence in myself? And very few people have looked at that. And there's many ways to do it if they were willing to look. And I know when you're coaching people who are usually pretty successful, when they come to you and then at the end of the what you've taught them, it's like they've now got a black belt in selling. And that's not achieved by saying, oh, put a red tie on, a power tie. It's achieved by you going into who they are and really going into their product. I saw an amazing survey done in America where they got insurance salespeople, and they had a certain amount of what's the term? The area with which they can operate. Their
territory.
Their territory. Yeah. So they were given a certain size territory, and in this study, they halved the territory, and then they halved it again, and then they halved it again. And there was almost no variation in what the insurance salesmen were earning, because someone who saw themselves, for instance, as a $100,000 salesperson, even when the conditions were going against them, and their market was getting smaller and smaller because deep down their self-identity was that they were a $100,000 salesperson. They maintained that same level. And at the heart, I think, of a lot of people hitting a ceiling on their income is they don't see themselves as actually being worth anything more than they're currently earning.
And so is it a process of faking it before you make it? Like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, in this process of building confidence and self-belief?
Well, it's a great question, and I think it's both. There is no doubt if, to a certain extent, you can improve things by behaving as if you're something. You know, the great Hollywood actor Cary Grant, who once sent my mother a signed photo. When he died, there was...
Geez, you got a good-looking son.
When he died in, well, it was probably the 1970s or something, there was a full page in the Hollywood industry journal, the Hollywood Reporter, a full page of all the luminaries in the world of film giving a quote on how great Cary Grant was. And at the bottom of the page, they put a single quote of Cary Grant himself. And he said, "I acted like Cary Grant for so long, I became." Because his name was Archibald Leach.
Right.
And he came from England knowing no one.
Mm-hmm.
And you ain't going to be a sex symbol when you're called Archibald Leach.
No.
Yeah. And so the acting works to a certain extent, but the being is 10 times more powerful. You know, people who get in a room with you, they know your stuff. They just know it. They can feel it. And what you say, it's more subtle than that, and it's more real than that. And whether it's our sixth sense or whatever, we can feel it. And we've also, haven't you been in a room where the guy's saying or the girl's saying exactly what they should be saying, and there's just not a chance in hell you're buying from them? As that saying goes, who you are is so loud, I can't hear what you're saying. And so we've got to combine the acting with the being and improve both.
You've written a number of books. I can't say that I've read all of them, but I've certainly read your book, Win Fast and Why People Fail. Going to the second book there, why do you think people fail?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. Self-belief, one, no doubt about it. Work ethic, another. Not having ideas is an entire chapter of that book, as you mentioned right at the start. Time management. It is amazing to me. Even highly intelligent people often use their time incredibly poorly. That doesn't mean they're not busy, but as someone once said, the ants are busy. What are you busy doing? And, I see even very smart people get nowhere in life because they're majoring in minor things. They're not doing the handful of things.
Such as what?
Well, income generation is a classic example.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, I was coaching a client yesterday, and super smart. He does multi-million-dollar contracts. And when we actually looked at how many potential clients that he didn't know that he was reaching out to, it was close to zero. Highly intelligent person, wanted to increase his income. And you would have seen that in your experience, I guess, that many people are not doing sales generation. But in your, you see as many clients as I do. What do you think are the things that people aren't doing that they should be?
I think one of the things that people focus on is what's not going right in their business or in their marketplace. And that type of approach makes you susceptible to, getting caught up with mainstream media sentiment, which is always going to be negative, and or if not getting caught up with it, a few days where you don't get things go your way, you go, look, even mainstream media saying the market's, down or what have you. And what that does, as far as I'm concerned, is take you away from looking at, well, what is working? What assets do I actually have in my business? Now, this isn't just about positive thinking. You've got a choice. Do you want to buy into the negative story or the positive story? There is a negative and positive story available for every circumstance throughout life. which story do you want to buy into? And I think one of the things that, when and business is not linear, it's sort of, for a lot of people, a bit of a roller coaster. And, the key is to not quit. But if you want to try to make it linear or to exponentially grow, I think you must have a capacity to go, well, what systems are working? What have I got? I was coaching a guy this week who came from, he visited from another country, and we were talking about he was hitting these struggles, and he was concerned that things were going so badly he might need to sell his home even. And I said, okay, so why are you thinking that? Well, because the success I used to get, I'm not getting today. And so I'd say, well, what are you doing? Now, at the end of the day, I think a lot of people fail to recognize that if you're not having conversations with people, you're not going, especially in the sales environment, you're not going to make any sales. Like, sales just don't fall out of the sky. You must initiate a relationship or a conversation with someone. And this guy had an email list of 32,000 potential candidates, for his offering. And I said, are you writing to your list? No.
Yeah.
He has a Facebook page with X amount of 1,000, I think, followers. Do you post regularly? No. Do you make reels on Facebook? Do you tell people about you? How many people know that you actually exist and you're open for business? And his whole outlook, which is pretty extreme when you think about someone needing to sell their home because business isn't going. His whole outlook is predicated on just the thing that he used to do that used to work just isn't working right now. Hasn't taken into consideration, well, what else can I do? Do you know what I mean? And I think that is the number one reason why people fail. They just choose to focus on the wrong thing, and buy into that negative story and create a perception that reality is displayed as this negative train of thought that I can go down. Because I think also a lot of people don't believe that they are entitled to success. They think that success is, well, it's a bit like buying a raffle ticket at a school fete. Maybe my number might get picked out. But I really do think that capacity to be able to look at, like, many years ago, I learned to fly. And part of learning to fly was simulating engine failures, right? And as a pilot, if heaven forbid the propeller, the thing at the front, stops spinning, right? You can't just focus on, well, shit, my propeller's not spinning, especially if you've got passengers on board and you want a chance of surviving. You've got to look at, well, what is going my way? Which way is the wind blowing? Is there a field there that I can land in? He said all of those sorts of things are really important to survival. And I really think that entrepreneurs often fail because they just focus on what's not working.
100%. I think you're spot on. And as an extension of that, when it's not working, they think something's wrong. But there is nothing wrong when it's not working. That is a normal business, things not working. And so they experience things not working. They then think, oh, the business is not going to work. This is wrong. I can't solve it. And they give up, or they have a zombie business. They're still in business for 20 years, but they've lost all hope. And they're really just, paying enough money to making enough money to make their rent. But if only they saw, when you read the biographies as you have of all these great business people, they're endlessly experiencing failure. I like to say, and part of that book, Why People Fail, is successful people fail more than failures. They really do. A great example of this, an example I love, is the founder of FedEx, Fred Smith. And everybody sees that they're the biggest air courier company in the world and how wonderful he's a multi-billionaire. But what they don't know is when Fred Smith was at Yale and he submitted his thesis at Yale School of Business, his final year thesis on what business he was going to start, They gave him a C- for the idea of FedEx.
Oh, wow.
And yet he continued with a radical model, which I won't go into in detail, but a radical model. And it was a complete failure, an absolute, utter failure. And he lost all his investors' money. And he was down to $6,000. And it was a Friday, and he had to pay his staff the next week. Now, a lot of people would have given up at that point. But what did Fred do? He went to Vegas. And what he decided was he was going to gamble the $6,000 in order to have enough money to pay the staff. And what do you think happened?
I don't want to ruin the story by giving you the wrong answer.
Okay. He succeeded and he got $30,000 and now he's a billionaire. Now, I'm not suggesting at all people go to a casino. That is a radical thing. But what it's an example of is someone not accepting failure when he was down to his last few thousand and he'd raised, millions to create this air courier company. He still thought there was a way. He was still looking for lateral methods of staying in business, and now he's a multi-billionaire.
That's such a great story because I look at people who draw a line in terms of what they're prepared to invest financially and time-wise into their business. They find themselves in a spot where they're going, it's not going well. I think I'm going to have to sell my house. When all they need is some more cash, some more time, and just an opportunity to try those other 25 other things that they haven't done.
Yeah.
And they are looking down, in their own mind, they're looking down the barrel of going broke, yet they're reluctant to do something that will afford them the opportunity to stay successful for fear of going broke. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't, get another mortgage out of my house to get some more money. That would mean I'm going backwards. And do you think that self-doubt, you talk about self-doubt, do you think that that's at the top of the list why people don't fail?
Well, I think it's right at the top. Why? Because our thinking then affects our actions, and then our actions affect our results. People they can understand that your actions affect your results, but what is the cause of taking an action? What is the cause, is to your point, of people not asking people to buy? It's embarrassment. It's fear of rejection.
Shame.
Yeah, shame. Yeah. And until you fix that, you'd have to have tremendous willpower to keep going. It's best to work at the cause, not just the effect. And most people are not prepared to do that work. And at the heart of it is the problems with the education system, because you can pay and it will cost you this over $80,000 a year US to go to Stanford School of Business.
Mm-hmm.
And in all their tuition, that costs an absolute fortune. Is there any work on refining the person inside so that you succeed in business? No, it's all external things. It's tactics. It's not getting to the core of the matter, which is in my actions, I'm a reflection of who I think I am.
Siimon, you and I have ventured into some businesses together, and I had an opportunity to work with you and observe you. And prior to actually, developing our working relationship at one time, I was acutely aware of the success you had achieved as a young entrepreneur. I mean, you're responsible for creating arguably Australia's most iconic television commercial. You were in the advertising space, as you alluded to earlier, and no doubt you would have confronted situations where you're running a fledgling business and you're thinking to yourself, gosh, this company better accept this pitch, otherwise we're screwed. At a young age, how did you think to be able to work through those incredible, what must be incredibly anxious moments, and persevere and stand up with a degree of confidence that your idea was the winning idea for this company?
Well, it's it's an interesting scenario. Several things were happening. First of all, you're definitely faking it till you make it. I started my first agency at 23, and I did not know what I was doing. I knew one element, which is how to write an ad, better than some people, but I didn't know 90% of what it takes to grow a business. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And so that can be a blessing because you start things without realizing how difficult they are. But number one, there's definitely faking it. But I think number two is people are very attracted to desire. And so when they see that you really want the business, that this really means a lot to you, then often it's the difference between them deciding for this company, yours, or another company. There's a lot of professional businesses in the world, but that they forget they're dealing with humans, and humans root for the success of other humans or good people.
And so there's a delineation, though, isn't there, between this desire that you talk about, presenting this desire for the business and presenting a desperation for the business. How are the two differentiated?
Yeah, great distinction. Well, I think that inside positive desire is a desire that you value this situation. So it's not just a client. It means an enormous amount to you. It's not just a marketing or business conundrum that you're trying to solve for them. It's to you, it's you really care about their end result. That kind of desire for their benefit is what attracts them, as well as that you can see this person really wants the business. See, anyone smart goes, well, between two people, one person seems like they really care for me and they really care for their own business. And another person just dots every I and looks like they're going to be professional. We forget that when everybody goes home, you get BHP or whatever the biggest company is in Australia, and it's run by some guy probably who is immaculate and speaks business jargon like no one else. But at the end of the day, they just go home, hug their kids, take their suit off, and get into a tracksuit and watch TV like the rest of us. And we have to sell to the whole person, not just the business person, the front that we're all putting up when we do business today. And the person who, and I know you teach these kind of subtleties, the person who is selling to the complete person, the human, not just the title, is the person who's ultimately more persuasive.
I think that is so true. And one of the other, I suppose, nuances of that I do talk a lot about is people want to feel like they matter.
Mm.
You need to make people feel like they matter.
Mm.
Now, that's very different to maybe solving a business problem. If you can make somebody feel like they matter, right? A person who is not brilliant on their product or their service, who is brilliant at making someone feel like they matter, will often win in a situation where they're competing with other businesses with similar services or similar products.
100%.
Conversely, if you make someone feel like they don't matter, I can guarantee you the result is always going to be no. I think one of the most awful feelings that a human being can feel in any situation is when you make them feel that they don't matter to you, or their concerns don't matter, or it's often I've observed a lot of people in negotiating their deal where a client or a potential client might raise a concern that might sound something like, "Oh yes, but what happens if blah 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 blah?" And they answer, "Oh, don't worry about that. You leave that to me," without actually addressing, well, how does that concern make people? Is making that person feel? And ignoring that sends a non-verbal signal to someone that they don't matter.
Yeah.
That they don't matter.
Yeah.
So, Simon, you're obviously been a driven person in all your time in business, once you started to get your early wins, because bear in mind that you were ultimately the co-founder of this organization. I think at one point it had 8,000
6,000.
6,000 employees. Sorry for my error there. 6,000 with a stock market listing of nearly or more than $500 million. So a guy who starts out realizing he's just got a bit of a creative talent and can write an ad better than the next person, how does he go from here to here? What's the thinking? What's the activity involved with doing that?
Well, a lot of it was just aspiration. So, you don't know I didn't know how to raise money to set up a company like that. I didn't know how to speak particular finance jargon to be able to build a company that ultimately was on the stock exchange. I didn't know anything about public companies. So it starts with an aspiration, not a knowledge base. And then I remember someone was telling me who was in the room with one of the two Atlassian guys who are in the top 3 richest people in Australia, and they were talking about public companies. They're in a room talking about taking Atlassian public, and this Atlassian guy barely knew anything about the subject, but it was everything anyone said, and he was writing down. And now I'll bet he knows as much about the subject as anyone in Australia. So it was the aspiration to keep learning. Do we have let's say we've got a business and we own 2 pizza parlors. Do we have 20 years experience selling pizzas, or do we have 2 years experience and then repeat it for 18 years? Guys like that Atlassian guy, they're continually learning, continually getting better. So number 1, aspiration. Number 2 is education. So I remember when I was raising $5 million to start that business, at night I would negotiate with the finance guys in the daytime, and at night I would read the one book I had on venture capital to work out what to say for the next day.
Right.
And I remember taking the author of that book, Chris Gollis, to lunch, and I rang him up. I said, I want to take you to lunch. You've made me millions of dollars, that book you wrote. And I did. I took him to lunch. So there's aspiration, then there's education, and then I'd say it's persistence, intelligent persistence with nuanced change, so that you're constantly getting it wrong, but you adjust. You adjust what you're saying, you adjust what your tactics are, and then finally bring in people who know stuff you don't. And all of those things were working together, and a dose of luck as well. Got to have that. But you've got to be in the arena again and again and again in order to enable luck to happen.
Mm. You've coached a couple of billionaires. You mentor a lot of successful people today. Do you think that the initial conversation that these successful business owners and entrepreneurs and billionaires have with you could be summarized by one specific subject category?
Great question. Well, I would say I want to get better. No one comes to me or no one comes to you. You have some incredible case studies of people who've just walked into you and you've transformed their business. But no one, doesn't matter whether they're a billionaire or a one-person business that comes into me or you, there's no one who doesn't want to get better. There's no one who's ambivalent about their business that comes to see us. We get people who want to be better. And what's fascinating is I have spent time with some of the richest people in the world, and they all want to get better because, they...
And what do they want to get better about?
Well, in many cases, if we talk about very, very rich people who work with me, it's business strategy or it's marketing strategy. Then if you go down to just generally successful people, I coach a guy who's made several hundred million US, and he's as much about becoming a better leader as he is about just getting a better business. he's as concerned about becoming excellent with his life partner as he is in his business, with his health, with his happiness. But at the same time, they want to make money. And I see a lot of successful CEOs, successful founders. They're applying the filter of excellence to every area of their life, not just.
So it's a generalized approach rather than a specific approach to one particular area.
Often.
Is that common?
Yeah, very common, particularly when you get deeper into the coaching relationship. Now, I'd imagine, some of your results are so great and the case studies are so extraordinary. Do you basically just get people who say, listen, I earn X and I want to earn 3X, or do you also get people who want the other side?
No, I totally subscribe to the concept of, and you taught me this. There's a technique that you taught me which has held me in good stead for many, many years now. And that's this. You told me once, I get up in the morning and I make a space to think about what sort of person do I need to be to deliver the best version of myself to everything I do today. Like that one thought has changed and really revolutionized everything around what I do and how I feel and how I navigate the world. So that's been fantastic. But when it comes to the people I coach, I more so focus on, I see the thing that holds them back is their inability to be able to push through past trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the interesting paradoxes that often exists with very successful people is difficult childhood, traumatic childhood, rags to riches stories, difficult childhoods. A lot of the time I see a commonality that, the person who has become mega successful in their space was virtually out on their own at 13, 14 years of age, navigating through life.
Mm.
And if you look at that objectively, they've had to grow up quickly. They've had to start thinking like an adult, and they've missed out on all these other developmental years. And as a result, that leaves an element of scarring in their life where they walk around with a wall somewhat. They refuse, and we talked about this element of trust. And one of the most important, I think, ingredients to developing trust with somebody is to be genuine and vulnerable. In other words, a lot of people who've been wounded in their childhood, or perhaps wounded in their exploits as they're growing their business, maybe they had a massive setback that caused them intense humiliation or embarrassment. In order for them to survive, they have to get around with some big wall around them, where what you see on the outside of this person isn't really what they are on the inside. They're actually a wounded person. And so one of the things that I look at, and while I don't coach or consult to people about their overall life, because that's not my thing, one of the things I look at is that's common is one of the things that holds them back is their capacity to relate to people in their space, clients, at a vulnerable level. And in order to do that, they must drop their wall. In other words, they must resolve the wounds of childhood or whatever and become okay with them so that they can deeply connect with, their audience. And so that's one of the things that I look at. So to your point, that does focus on them being more profitable, more successful, and isn't that holistic, all areas of life. But I think mental attitude, it's a word, it's a phrase that's thrown around often and people don't understand exactly what it means. But mental attitude is the optimization, I believe, of your own thoughts, to be okay with who you are. I think it's fantastic how you have alluded to a few minutes back You don't have to be successful all the time in business. In fact, business is about ups and downs. It doesn't always go your way. And acquiring the comfort of knowing that, do you know what? In fact, with hugely successful people that I've worked with, and I'm interested to know whether at your level of the people and caliber of the people that you coach, whether you see this, they don't need very many things to go their way. In fact, most things that they try don't work. The one or two things that they do try produce tremendous success. And so that's why I was wondering about when you first meet with a consulting client, business owner who wants to get better, do you see this apparent similarity between client and client and client of the one thing that's held them back from really obtaining that success? Do you see as there being any one thing?
Well, I think it's either, this is two sides of the same coin. I think it's either they don't know what to do or they know what to do and they're not doing it. You know, most businesses could be get dramatically more profit if the owner just did what they know they should do. So they're aware of it.
Can you give me an example of what you mean?
Well, someone will say, I know I should call more people up and ask them if they'd like to, have a look at my carpets in my carpet shop. They know they should do that. And for 30 years, they'll sit in their carpet shop and not call. So there's definitely.
And so what do you think holds that carpet store retailer back from making those calls?
Well, I think fear and they're busy. Those two things, fear and busyness. And maybe a third one a lot of the time, which is money's coming in without me doing it. That's enough. So you have people who are know what they should do. And that's why when they come to a coach, they can make a lot of money in a short period of time because the coach says, did you do it? And then 2 weeks later, the coach has a meeting, or a week later, well, did you do it? And eventually they do it. So just being with a coach will normally increase most people's income if the coach does nothing else but holds them accountable. And then secondly, there's stuff they just don't know what to do. I was with a client yesterday and they did not know how to generate leads. You're a master of generating leads. I can tell you, in all this city, there's barely a person who knows how to generate leads like you do, right? They just don't know it. You could be a Mensa genius, but if you don't know how to do it, then it's useless to be intelligent. So those two things combined, arguably, as Jim Collins, the great management guru, said, it's optimization, doing things you're already doing better, and it's innovation, doing things you're not doing and start doing it.
In terms of your success, Siimon, was there an occurrence or a point in time where a situation occurred in your growth of business that had a profound effect on the outcome? A specific something that you've gone, wow, and then seem to have exponentially grown from that point?
Well, there were moments. So when I was very young in the industry, I started studying the greats of American advertising and British advertising, and they had an incredible work ethic. And by reading about these people that lived and died, they'd sleep under their desk in order to do great ads. That was a big moment for me, is the switch to trying to be great like these people in how they viewed creating advertising. And then there was another time that was instrumental where I got sacked from being a creative director of an ad agency, and I had the choice of either retreating in that industry or opening my own agency.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up opening my own agency, and that taught me a very important lesson, which was not always, but in many cases, you're better to just keep daring than just go back into living small.
Safe mode.
Yeah, and those philosophies, excellence and daring were critically important. What about you? Were there moments where the defined who you are today?
Look, I have to say that probably some of my biggest failures have defined who I am today. And I know that doesn't sound, it sort of doesn't sound right, but it's amazing what you can learn from failure. I think you learn more from failure than what you learn from success. And I think I have always been daring. You know, I saw an email that, because I'm on your email list, I saw an email that you wrote recently about increasing your prices. And we know we live in a world where, things are getting financially tighter for people. One would, possibly err to thinking I'll sell more if I reduce my prices. And I think, when I think about the failures, some of the failures that I've learnt the most from is when I've dropped my price and ended up picking up a shittier client than I otherwise would have, who, was a real ball breaker in terms of working with. But today, and I learned from that, become, and this is what has positioned me, become the most expensive in your field and make sure that the service you offer equals the expense of, your retainer as such. Now, I wouldn't have thought that way if I hadn't had the experience of dropping my price and noticing I'm attracting, shitty clients, in terms of that. But one other area that I want to ask you about, and I think this is somewhat of a specialty for you, is you seem to have spent a lot of time, watching the processes, as you alluded to, of the Blue Angels or some Navy SEALs or whatever, with a specific focus to optimization with everything. That has seemed to be a specific, attraction of yours. Is there an area that you're still trying to optimize?
Oh, there's a million. I mean, there's no area that I think I'm almost no area that I think I'm anywhere near my possibilities. And one of my hobbies and what I coach people on a lot, because I'm interested in it, is elite performance psychology. So as you mentioned, from elite military units to elite professional sports teams. And what I love about that is that they're all about winning. They're not so much about, tell me what happened to your mother when you were 12, although that, that's completely valid, a strand of psychology. They're like, how do we win next week?
Yeah.
And how do we make sure you're in the right mental space to win next week? And I believe that one of the best things you can do in business is you can say, in my field, what are the best going to be doing in 20 years' time? And can I do it now? And I believe that if you do that, you get ahead of you can get an advantage over everybody in your field. Like a great sci-fi author, William Gibson, said, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. So there are people who in the business community, not many, who are using high-level performance psychology as used in professional sports teams in the business arena, but there's not many of them. And one of the things that I coach my clients on is, okay, you got these business tactics. Now, this is the winning mindset that we'll take, and it's just taken from pro sport and Navy SEALs, et cetera. That is an exciting area that I'm very interested in. I feel that I know a lot about. Am I at the absolute top of it? not yet, but I'm wanting to get there, and I think I'm ahead of most.
And so the client for you is that person that wants to optimize their approach to winning.
Yeah.
Who is well and truly in the game to win and wants to win more often.
Oh, spot on. And you're the same. You know, people come to you. You're not just instilling strategies, although they make a lot of money from what I've seen from your case studies. You're also instilling a mindset that they can carry on even after the coaching's finished. You know, it's all about people who are excellent or aspire to excellence or not. As one of my favorite quotes in my life is by the American football coach Vince Lombardi decades ago. And he said, the quality of a person's life is in direct proportion to their commitment to excellence, regardless of their chosen field of endeavor. The quality of a person's entire life is their commitment to excellence, regardless of what they do. And it doesn't matter if you're a cup maker or you're a mortgage broker or whatever. Are you prepared to commit to being great? And then if you do that, you've already won. It's just a matter of time.
Well, Simon, I always love people who can not only talk the talk, but who have walked the walk. And you are one of those people who can talk the talk out of having walked the walk. So thank you very, very much for joining us on this episode. And I appreciate, and I've learned a hell of a lot through this conversation with you. Thanks, Simon.
Me too. Appreciate it, Mark.